Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a couple of times before. So I've had some really nice beers from this brewery over the years, a few different styles, and I think it's fair to say that this brewery are best known for their different styles of Belgian beer. So the one that we're going to have a look at today is a style that I've not had from them yet. It's one of my favourite styles of Belgian beer, in fact, and it's also been a little while since I've had a Swedish brewed example of this one. So very much looking forward to this, curious to see what it has in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to a little place called Gnesta, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which is just to the south of Stockholm, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Den Bryggande Holländaren. So this particular beer is called Quatre Lutin, or the Four Elves, as you would translate it into English. It comes in at 9.8% ABV, and this one is a quadruple. So yeah, I think this could be a very interesting one. So the last beer that I had from Den Bryggande Holländaren was if I remember right, it was a Belgian blonde, and it was really quite solid actually. So when I saw that they were releasing a quadruple this month, I thought, you know, I have to have a go at this one. So yeah, nice to return to these guys after what I believe has been about 6-7 months, something like that. I think the last beer we reviewed was like in June or July, if I'm remembering correctly. So yeah, this one should be a very nice return to them. I love these Belgian quadruples. My favourite styles of Belgian beer would of course be the blonde, the triple, the quadruple, and of course I do love a Flanders red as well. But let's crack on with this one then and see how we go. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Den Bryggande Holländaren before, and we will no doubt add some more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you, and that's being added to pretty much all the time because I'm back over here in Sweden, of course. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Den Bryggande Holländaren. So, this brewery, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Gnesta in Södermanland, which is near Stockholm, and the town has only about 5,500 people, and it was home to the Holmen Brewery from 1870 until the 1960s. But Den Bryggande Holländaren was founded in 2013 by husband and wife team Wilbert Duvestein and Teresa McGovern, who are from the Netherlands and America respectively. Hence you can see where the name comes from. But they moved to Sweden a few years ago from Rotterdam, and Wilbert says that he wanted to combine Dutch and Swedish brewing and beer traditions, and he decided that was one of the main reasons why I was going to go with the Brewing Dutchman as his brewery name, but obviously in Swedish. But Wilbert had been a home brewer for a long time, and he wanted to turn his passion into his profession. So initially he wanted to brew individual batches of 500 litres, but he later decided he was going to produce a small core batch, or a small core range of 3 different beers to get into Systembolaget. And over the last few years the brewery have gradually expanded their brewing capacity, and they now produce sour beers and do barrel aging as well. They offer brewing courses too, and there's actually a few kind of home brewing related videos on YouTube embedded into the website if you care to go and take a little look at that. So yeah, they do enjoy teaching a little bit about brewing as well. But as of January 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 40 different kinds of beer according to Untappd. As I said to you, I think this brewery are probably best known for brewing the different kind of Belgian style beers, but there are various other things in there as well, like, you know, West Coast IPAs, East New England IPAs. I think there was 1 or 2 of those, and they've also got black IPA listed there as well, which we reviewed a few months ago, Black as My Soul, and that was pretty nice actually. But yeah, mainly a Belgian style brewery, I would say, Belgian and sour beer brewery. But yeah, they do other things too. So yeah, that is everything I can tell you about the Bryggande Holländaren for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Rate Beer, Untappd, and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. But yeah, let's get on and have a little look at the beer itself. So, as I mentioned to you earlier, this one comes in at 9.8% ABV. It's a Belgian style quadruple. You can see it's a 330ml bottle. There on the bottle cap is the outline of, see if the camera will focus on this. Doesn't want to. Yeah, this, you can see the outline of Wilbert's head. I'm not sure if I think this camera has I think it likes to focus on faces, so yeah, you have to put this in front of your face whenever you want to show it. But you can also see on the back of the label there, that is there too. But yeah, this is basically the outline of Wilbert's glasses and hair and stuff like that. He's got quite fluffy hair, which is pretty cool. But yeah, 9.8% ABV. This one, I think I paid about 40 Swedish kronor for this. So that is about €4, somewhere in the region of like £3.25 sterling. And I guess for those of you in other places, you know, it will be somewhere in the region of like $5 American, something like that. Just so all of you have a price reference. So for what the beer is, pretty good value, I would say. But yeah, 9.8% quadruple, named the Four Elves from the Brewing Dutchman Brewery in Gnesta near Stockholm. So yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very, very curious about this, as always. And one of my favourite styles of beer. So curious to see this. As you'll know, if you've watched the channel for any length of time, I'm a big sucker for the big kind of brown sugary styles like, you know, Belgian quadruples, German doppelbocks, and of course my native Scotch ale, Rauch beers as well, is another way to make me very happy. So yeah, here we go. The beer is out and in the glass where it should be. So yeah, before the head on this one disappears then, it's poured with about somewhere between a quarter and a third of a frothy, I would say kind of fawn coloured head. It's got a nice kind of fluffy ring. Around the edge of the glass, but that has just faded away to be a very kind of thin, slightly wispy layer sitting on top of that. It's actually faded away quite quickly, but when you think that this beer is a big 9.8%er, it kind of makes sense. Although some of the quadruples and triples that you'll come across will hold their head quite nicely. But yeah, anyway, that's all we really need to say about the head on this one. That has pretty much gone. But if we shine the light through this beer, I would start off as well by saying this is actually one of the darker quadruples I can think of that I've come across in recent times. Now remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, the length of the wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in can affect the colour as well, and that can come into play with quadruples. Actually, I have seen quadruples affected colour-wise slightly when it comes to barrel aging. But yeah, it is yeah, really a little bit of a darker one, this, which is interesting. But the thing with quadruples, you have to remember, quite often what they do with triples, quadruples, and I think even doubles as well, is that they actually put candy syrup and a kind of sugar into them to take the alcohol content up. That's quite a common thing to do with this particular style. But yeah, this one's got a lovely, very dark kind of mahogany type colour to it. This, if you shine the light through it, it actually has a little bit of an almost slightly Coca-Cola coloured edge to it actually, but there's a wee bit of ruby light coming through this one too. So yeah, nicely coloured beer, this one, but definitely one of the darker quadruples I can think of that I've had in recent times. And I do have a few Belgian brewed quadruples back home in Scotland that I need to work my way through too. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of that head there, but overall it does look pretty nice. I don't think we need to say any more about the appearance of this one. You can see it quite clearly, and it's certainly not out with the realms of possibility from what we should expect for this style. So yeah, let's have a look at this one and see how we go. So Aroma time. Yeah, this is pretty nice. So, first off, I'm going to say this beer, it's actually interesting. It has a little bit of a kind of slightly dry and very slightly chocolatey note to it. That's kind of interesting. I don't know how common it is to use chocolate malt in quadruples and things, but I've got a feeling there might just be a little hint of it in here. So this is definitely one of the kind of slightly drier and bready leaning aromas that I've had from this style, as far as memory goes. But on top of that, there is a lot of brown sugar in there, and it's very slightly toasty as well. So yeah. And this is an interesting one. I like beers, you know, having done 3,200 beer reviews pretty much, I like beers that test my nose and test my palate a little bit, and I've got a feeling that this one is going to do that. But yeah, it does smell very, very nice, this. It actually reminds me of the Castile Donker a little bit. I do remember that one being a little bit more toasty, so this beer reminds me of that, but that one wasn't strictly a quadruple. That was like a Belgian strong dark ale, and to be honest with you, you get quite a few beers like this. Like the Abbey breweries always call them triples and quadruples, but a lot of the other breweries call them, you know, Belgian strong blonde ale, Belgian strong dark, and so on. So yeah, and quite often they are just referred to with numbers, of course, due to the alcohol. But yeah, this is nice. So the backbone of this beer, aroma-wise, there's a sort of bread crusty backbone to this, absolutely. There's one or two woody and nutty things coming out of it. On top of that, you get a nice little bit of a kind of dry bread crusty element. So yeah, I really quite like that actually. I think we've just got a little bit of sunlight coming through the window there, which is nice. So I can see the screen of the camera just brightened up there. I don't know if that will affect the video. But anyway, like I say, a little bit of a woody backbone for me, woody and nutty. Definitely some nice kind of bread crust in there. That goes together really nicely actually. Yeah, definitely a nice kind of dry, slightly bread crusty backbone, a little bit of wood and nutty character in there. On top of that, you do start to get a little bit of a very sweet, almost a very sweet kind of brown bready sort of note out of it. I'm getting a few kind of like fruit cakey type notes out of this beer as well. There is a wee teeny bit of that kind of slightly dry chocolate coming out of this one, like a sort of chocolatey powder, but I would say the more and more that I smell of this beer, the more that takes a back seat. I think that's definitely fair to say. And on top of this, you've got all these lovely kind of brown sugary notes coming out of the beer. So yeah, on the brown sugary side of things, it's brown sugary side of things, it's quite it's interesting with this one. So there's definitely a wee bit of that kind of, there's a whole spectrum of brown sugar in this, and this is one of the reasons why I love the quadruple as a style. So you can certainly smell a wee bit of that more oily treacle molasses kind of thing coming out of this one, and that's, I think, what's covering up a lot of the kind of boozy side of the beer. But underneath that, you can pick up a little bit of a sweeter caramel and definitely a wee bit of a biscuit in there. But I think forming the base of the brown sugars in this one, there is a little bit of that toasty, a little bit of that kind of toasty, caramelly character coming out of it. So I really like how that goes together in this beer. Yeah. So aroma-wise, this one is... aroma-wise, the malty side of this one is very nice. And just going from the aroma in this, it does have a little bit of that slightly kind of phenolic, fruity sort of thing to it, that phenolic candy fruity kind of thing, which you'll always get from, you'll always get when they put candy syrup into the beers. So yeah, this one I think is really nice from its malt, on the malty and yeasty perspective actually. So yeah, big thumbs up from me on this side of things. These are all things that you would expect from the style, of course, but definitely for me, this one comes across, the more I smell it, it comes across a little bit more boozy. It's got a little bit of, a wee kind of, a slight touch of a dry chocolatey note to it. It gets a little bit cakey, and the brown sugars are very nice as well. So yeah, this will be quite interesting. I'd be curious to know what the wort boil time on this one is, because it's quite dark, but it doesn't have so much of a kind of leathery brown sugar note to it, but we'll see how that comes out in the taste. The longer you boil the wort, the more you get this slightly leathery taste to the brown sugars. So we'll see how that comes across in the taste. But let's focus on the hoppy and fruity side of things to round off our look at the aroma. So, on the hoppy side of things, I would say there's a wee touch of earthiness in there, definitely, but that's, again, that takes a bit of a back seat. I do actually get a little bit of a floral character and a bit of grassiness out of this one though. But remember, the Quadrupel is a style that you can let sit for quite a while. It is a style that you can age. This one, just going by the date on the bottle, it says it's best before the 1st of June 2022. For the 1st of June 2022, it's how do you say it? That means it's probably been, I think this one probably will have been brewed back in June and it's been allowed to sit for a while, because 2 years seems like a logical amount of time for this one to last. But that is still kind of fairly fresh, so that would make sense as to why we're still getting a wee bit of fruitiness out of the beer. So sorry, a wee bit of grassiness and floral character out of the beer. But yeah, there is a wee bit of that just kind of lingering there. Yeah, be curious to know what hop variety's been used in this one as well, actually. But yeah, on the fruity side of things then, let's look at that. So the base of the fruity part of this beer, it has a little bit of that almost cakey aroma to it. But, you know, sitting on top of that, you certainly have a wee bit of a kind of, it's all things that you'd expect. On top of the kind of cakey side of the beer, there's definitely a little bit of that kind of dry, figgy character to it. There's a little bit of a kind of lighter black currant as well. But yeah, I get some nice kind of raisiny sharpness in there, some juicy plums, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Some nice little bit of raisin, a little bit of plum, but kind of dried fruits underneath, and there's a wee bit of that kind of typical more oily blackberry. The fruity side of this beer, to be honest, is what you'd expect. But yeah, this is an interesting smelling Quadrupel, this one. So as I always say, take a wee bit of time just to ponder over the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. So let's have a taste of this one then and see how we go. So yeah, this one is the Quatre Lutin, the 4 Elves, a Quadrupel at 9.8% ABV from Den Bryggande Holländaren in Gnesta to the south of Stockholm. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Now, this is quite nice. First impression of it. It's not the sweetest Quadrupel I've come across, I will say that, but it does have a wee bit of that kind of chocolatey and bready character that I was picking up in the aroma. So that's interesting. It does lean towards that, and that's a kind of leaning that I've not had too much of out of all the different Quadrupels that I've reviewed. So yeah, interesting stuff for sure. But yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel with this one as well, it comes across as very slick and very clean, which is interesting. But you quite often find this with styles that are brewed in Sweden. The water quality here is such that you get some, you just get these lovely kind of more slick mouthfeels coming out of the beer. So yeah, this one is quite nice for sure. Yeah, so let's break this beer down then and describe it for you. Yeah, backbone of the beer then, the malty backbone. We'll focus on the middle third and the back third of the palate as we always do. Middle third of your palate. So there's a nice little bit of a kind of dry bread crusty. There's a nice little bit of a kind of dry bread crusty sort of thing to this beer. So that forms the backbone. Yeah, there's a wee bit of this kind of toasty bread crust. It's almost slightly well fired, but yeah, it is quite interesting that I've never had that as in a Quadrupel as far as I can remember. But yeah, it's one of the darker bread crusts I've come across in this style for sure. So that is the backbone of the beer. As you move towards the kind of front part of that middle third of your palate. There are one or two little woody and nutty elements that come out, particularly the further into the aftertaste that you go. But then, yeah, on top of the bread crusty note, on top of that, you have a little bit more of a kind of thicker. You have a little bit more of a kind of thicker brown bready character to it as well, which I really like. So yeah, it does have a wee bit of that kind of thicker, normal brown bready character. So yeah, this is really, really nice in this one. And that, I think the sweetness of the brown bread builds up a little bit the more that you drink of. I've only taken a couple of sips, but yeah, I think the breadiness of this one really builds up a wee bit. So that's good. But yeah, on top of that bready layer though, I think there's definitely a wee bit toward the back of that middle third of your palate. You can feel that on top of the bread, it's got a wee bit of this kind of dry, chocolatey character to it, and it's not so much like cocoa nib or something like this. It feels a little bit darker, like a slightly heavier cocoa chocolate, you know, a sort of 70-80% cocoa sort of thing. So yeah, there is a real little bit of dryness sitting on top of the bready part of the beer. But then as you move further forward from that, you get the circle, the brown sugar circle in the middle of your palate. So the base of that circle definitely is a kind of toasty brown sugar, like I was talking about as well. This beer really does have a wee bit of a kind of toasty and kind of dry character to it, which is interesting from the Quadrupel, because for me, normally these beers are quite a bit sweeter than this one actually. This one does have sweetness to it, don't get me wrong, but this is quite different in its nuances from a number of the other Quadrupels I've had. But yeah, for me, the base of the brown sugar in this one is a little bit of a kind of toasty, slightly well-fired caramelly sort of thing. At the edges of that brown sugar circle, you've got a little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity kind of thing, and as you move in toward the centre, it becomes a little bit more like an oily caramel, and then as you reach the kind of dead centre, the epicentre of your whole palate, if you like, that's when you get a wee bit of that's when you get a wee bit more of a kind of treacly molasses sort of thing with this one. So yeah, that's when you're getting all the booziness coming out of the beer. So the beer does actually feel a little bit boozier. It's not the booziest Quadrupel I've had. I think I've had ones that have been like 12% and stuff like that. But yeah, this one at 9.8%, it actually does feel a little bit boozier in the flavour than it actually is. So that's an interesting point to make about this one for sure. But yeah, it does, in fairness, the brown sugary side of the beer sweetens the whole thing up a little bit more the further that you go. The further that you go into the flavour with it too. So I can appreciate that about this one. I really can appreciate that about this beer. So yeah, interesting points to be made here. So let's focus. I think that's everything we need to say about the middle third of your palate on this one, but let's focus on the back third of the palate then. So border region, between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a bready build up there. You do get a nice little bit of a bready build up on this one. And you can feel there's a wee bit of that drier bread crust there, but then the base of that back third of the palate is the base on that back third of the palate is a little bit more of you've got more of that kind of bread crusty grainy sort of thing in there for sure. On top of that, you get a slightly thicker brown bready layer too, and then on top of that you can feel the yeasty character. You can feel the yeasty character coming out of this one, and for me the yeasty notes in this are a little bit drier. Again, yeah, the yeasty notes in this beer are a little bit kind of dry in a sense, but yeah, as I say, a bit of a grainy bread crusty backbone on top of that, a slightly sweeter brown bread, and then on top of that you can feel like a sort of like a kind of crusty but more dense doughy yeasty character to this one. That just sits on top of everything on the back third of the palate. So on the back third of the palate you can feel that the height of the flavour is kind of like this, but then as you come further forward, as I always say, it condenses down as you go into the middle third of the palate, and those flavours just kind of squash together as you go forward. But yeah, this is pretty nice actually. Let's focus on the hoppy side of the beer then. So, in terms of the the back corners of the palate, then there's definitely a wee bit of an earthiness to this one for sure. And then as you move further forward, it gets a little bit more kind of herbal. So this does make me wonder if it's been if there has been Belgian hops used in this one, because Belgian hops are almost between the kind of the noble hops and the English hops. The English hops are always more herbal and earthy. The German hops are a bit more kind of floral and grassy, or noble hops we should say. But Belgian hops have a bit of both. And you can certainly pick that up in this beer. But yeah, you move forward from the back corners of your palate where it's earthy, it gets a little bit more herbal, and as you push towards the kind of front corners of the palate, it's got a little bit more of a kind of floral aromaticity to it just lingering there. But round the front curve of the palate, it's a wee bit lighter, and it is a wee bit lighter and grassy. So yeah, I do like how this goes together actually. This is beer, it really kind of grows on me a little bit. This one, as I kind of drink more of it, so it's as I say, it's a nice example of the quadruple style, but it's just the breadiness and the it's really a big bready leaning one, and the sort of graininess and dryness that it has, as well as the wee bit chocolatey character. It just makes it a bit different. But let's focus on the front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of things. So yeah, border region between middle and front third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a kind of bready build up with this one. Absolutely, a nice little bit of bready build up there. Then the base of that front third of your palate, it has a wee bit more of a how would we say, yeah, it's got a wee bit more of that kind of dry brown bready sort of thing. But then, you know, toward the back of that front third of your palate, there is a little bit of an almost cakey, fruit cakey kind of build up to the beer, which I really quite like. But then yeah, sitting on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So for me, the base, on top of that kind of slightly bready layer there, the base of the fruity side of things is like a sort of dry figgy character. So yeah, on top of all of that, on the back half of the front third of your palate, there's a wee bit of a kind of raisiny note, a wee bit of a juicy plum underneath. Then you've got that slightly drier figgy character. Then as you move further forward, it starts to evolve. On the base layer, it starts to evolve to be a little bit more of a kind of a dry blackcurranty kind of thing. Yeah, a little bit of a kind of dry blackcurranty vibe coming out of this one. But then on top of that, the further you go into the aftertaste, you do get a little bit of that more oily blackberry. But I think it's the drier fruity characters, it's the fig. It is the kind of figgy character and the blackcurrant that kind of lingers there. But again, the dominant aftertaste in this beer for me is the sort of bready and slightly grainy and even slightly chocolatey side of things. And some of the toasty brown sugars come out with a wee bit of the sweetness in this one, the further that you go into the aftertaste with it. So yeah, this is an interesting quadruple. It's quite different to some of the other ones that I've had before. And it does, the kind of booziness that this beer has reminds me a little bit of the Castile Donker in some ways. So yeah, interesting stuff for sure. But thumbs up to Bryggande Holländaren for this one. This is another interesting beer. I don't know if I've had a triple from these guys. I can't remember. I think I've had about 7 or 8 beers from them now. And they always tend to be pretty nice and quite it's slightly different to what I'm used to with the style. And that's why I like going back to this brewery, because they do test the palate a little bit. But yeah, when I see a quadruple, 9 times out, if I see a quadruple through, pardon me, Systembolaget, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to try it. So yeah, but this is nice. I think we can leave it at that for the flavour. Let's round off with the mouthfeel. So for me, this beer, I would say, yeah, this is, it's kind of bottom end of full bodied for me, top end of mid bodied. It's kind of in that range. The carbonation is very smooth. It does have a degree of oily slickness to it, which I like, but you know, because of the Swedish water, it still feels very clean. I always say this about Nordic beers generally. So it does have that. It's quite a slick but still quite smooth quadruple, this one. And to be fair, when I think about it, it's not really out of character compared with the Belgian and Dutch brewed versions that I've had of this this style. But in terms of IBUs and things like that, I guess this beer isn't all that better. I mean, I think it's at most, I think we're talking about 30, well, it's probably not even 30, probably about 25 IBUs or something like that. It does have a bit of graininess to it and breadiness and things, which gives the beer a bit of a dry character, but whether that can be counted as IBU, that's one of these things that I've spoken about many times in videos before. But the malty base of this one, he said, it's got a little bit of dryness, a bit of smooth breadiness, and it has a bit of sweetness to it, a bit of toastiness to the sweetness as well. The fruitiness, for me, it leans towards that more dry fruity side of things, but there's a wee touch more oily character to it as well. But yeah, I like how this beer goes about its business. Actually, it is pretty interesting. So yeah, interesting one. So yeah, this was the Quatre Lutin. Is it? Yeah, Lutin. I want to say Lupin, but no, Quatre Lutin. A 9.8% quadruple from den Bryggande Holländaren in Gnesta, Södermanland, near Stockholm. So yeah, let's leave it at that. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from den Bryggande Holländaren as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys at some point over the next couple of months. So keep an eye out for another review from these guys, and do check out some of their beers if you're ordering stuff through Systembolaget. Thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll see you guys on the next review. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and make sure you check out some quadruples. Love this style.